Hello and welcome to the 30k channel. I'm your host David Brains, and in this video today I am going to give you my thoughts and my experience with the Civitas District Realm of Battle boards from Forgeworld for Adeptus Titanicus. Now, the reason why this video has come about, I've noticed a lot on the Adeptus Titanicus forums on Facebook and lots of just questions in general about whether they're worth buying, you know, how are they finding the boards, or buildings they've attached to them. And there's a lot to talk about in this video about these particular boards. I just want to say from the outset, I am a big fan of them. However, I think there are some considerable downsides to them, which I think need talking about. So we'll get straight into it. If you are unaware of the channel produces 30k battle reports. Hopefully, if you're watching this, you know that. And we also produce Adeptus Titanicus battle reports as well. Some are available on YouTube, and hopefully you found us there and you've watched a few games. Hopefully you enjoy them. But if you want tons and tons more battle reports for Adeptus Titanicus and 30k, please go to the website. It's www.the30kchannel.com. You can subscribe. It's £4.50 a month, and there you'll get a game every Friday. Adeptus Titanicus, we usually release one a month. At the moment, of course, because of the coronavirus, there are no battle reports, but there is content going out on the website, 3 videos a week, and we take you through some of the nuances of 30k. Now, we'll get back to the boards. Like I said at the outset of the video, I do love these boards. They are fantastic, but there are a few issues which I'd like to address. It's not going to be bashing Forgeworld. It's just going to be my personal thoughts on them. The first thing is they look fantastic. They bring a cityscape to your games of Adeptus Titanicus, which, unless you possess some amazing skill, your average person like me will not be able to replicate at home with some plasticard and some foam and whatever. You'll spend years and years crafting and cutting, and you will get nowhere near like this. If you're one of those people, you can do amazing, good work, good on you. Now, I'm not one of those people. My first impressions of the boards, if you start when you open the box, when it comes through the door, you go to collect it in Nottingham, it has to be, and I hate to address it, the warpage of the boards. Now, hopefully you can see that every single one of my boards, it was warped, and every single one of the 30k, 40k boards, Realm of Battle tiles, I've got a load of them, they're all warped as well. Now, you know, we all know this, we all know resin products, they warp. I'm not bashing Forgeworld for this, but they are a bit of a pain to straighten. There's lots of advice online, you know, submerge them in hot water, use a hairdryer, use a heat gun. There's lots of different methods, and people are still getting it wrong. Now, the way I straightened my board is that, and I'll put up a photo so you can see this, but essentially I got a couple of clamps, some bits of wood, and I overbent the boards on the side that was particularly bent. And you need to overbend it because when it returns to its natural shape, or returns to its new straightened shape, it will go back, because if you don't do it enough, it will only go part of the way. So as you can see, there's a piece of wood which I put across the board, and then there's some chocks underneath which I helped overbend it. Now, I boiled a kettle full of water. I went outside in the garden and I just dumped the entire contents of the kettle over the board. Now, obviously, you know, health and safety, don't burn yourself. You know, if you need an adult to do it, great. Make sure you get them to do it for you. But if you don't want to go so dramatic, then a hairdryer will do the job, or a heat gun, better still, that used for stripping paint off doors or wooden surfaces, whatever. So it does work as well, but you will need to overbend it to make sure that when it relaxes, it goes back to a straightened state. Now, you're saying, well, you know, you've straightened them and they're not straight. You're right, they were straight for probably a couple of weeks, and then they've been in my spare room, and the heat has got to them, and they have just slowly, over time, just kind of warped up. It's a pain, I can tell you. Every single one of my boards have done that. The way I got around it, though, is what I did is I measured between the end, because they're not exactly 2 foot. They don't match up to the Games Workshop Realm Battle boards, which is really frustrating itself. We're going to come to that a little bit later on. So I measured on each side the center point of the board, and then I measured, I don't remember the exact measurement, but I measured to a point on the corner both sides. So maybe it was, you know, if they're 24 inches long, maybe it was, I don't know, 10, 12, 13 inches either side of that center line, and I drilled a 5mm hole, and then I got some 5mm welding rod, and I cut a little bit off and I plugged it in the end there, and then I did the same on every single board. So when the boards match up, you put this little plug in and I plug the other one in, and when they're all in place, they all sit at the same height. Now they still curve a little bit, but at least when the two surfaces meet, they are curved together rather than one being higher than the other, which really bugs me. So that does work. It's a bit of a pain because you've got to measure quite accurately, and if they don't line up and you bore the hole out even more, it messes it up. So you have to be very accurate when you do it. But it does work, so it works really well. I appreciate you shouldn't have to go to those lengths to straighten your boards. I totally get that. But, you know, like me, if you've straightened them and they've gone back and now they're painted, I don't want to be dumping hot water all over them. I might try the hairdryer or a heat gun on them just to try and get them settled down a little bit more. But these pins in each corner really helps. So that's one way of getting around it. The other option is I've seen online that some people have cut a piece of MDF the width of the board and then they've glued the board down. I guess you can do that. My only criticism of that, it just creates the board, just makes it a lot heavier than it needs to be. But if that's not an issue for you, you can keep it in the garage or spare room or a gaming cupboard, whatever, then that'll work just as well. I haven't done that myself because I just didn't want to buy and cut wood, and some people haven't got access to a table saw or a circular saw, and you really need a perfectly straight edge, and I just felt that I perhaps couldn't quite manage that. So that's the warpage. It's not ideal, but it's just one of those things. I can't complain too much because it is a luxury product. You know, what can you do? It's a tricky one. So moving on to the next big thing, the reason why a lot of people don't have these boards, I think, is because of the costs. They're £84 a tile. So if you multiply that by 4 for a 4x4, it's a lot of money. Again, I'm not going to complain about the price because a Spartan is £100. A Thanatar is, I think, £87 off the top of my head, or near £100. So, you know, we are in a luxury hobby. If you're complaining about the price, don't buy them. You know, you can buy a fat mat, which are great, and we'll get to that a little bit later on as well, and will do just as good a job. I think the reason why you buy these boards is because you just want something different to fight over, and it does give you some different tactical decisions to make, because once you start putting buildings onto the boards, it does push you through a route through the board, which is really interesting. So this is one of the tiles I've painted. I've gone for a very, very neutral, bland paint scheme. There's a little bit of colour in the building tops with green, and the silos here are gold. I've done a little bit of flash of red here and there to make things a little bit interesting, and the defence lines I've made yellow. I'm going to go through each tile individually because there are some very key points which I really want to point out to you. First of all, this one. This is the beta tile, I think. I did write it on the side. Yeah, delta tile, this one. And it's essentially it's your airport, isn't it? You've got the 3 landing pads and some, I guess they're Promethean tanks or fuel tanks. Here, from this point onwards, I'll get photos of these and overlay them for you. So on here, I've replaced the building section. I've cut it off with a Dremel, and I put down the little barricade set which you can buy from Forgeworld. The reason why I did that is because it had essentially this piece, this top piece here, running along this section. But then on this side, oh sorry, it's the other way around. Sorry, I'm going to divert. Sorry, it was this side I replaced. This side, it just looked weird. It looked weird. I don't know why you had the continuation of the top of this building along here. It looked really, really odd, and I couldn't work it out of my head. So I decided to Dremel it off, and then I used the barricade set. I think it's actually both sides. I did both sides. It just looked weird, and I thought, oh, can't be doing with that. Dremeled it off, fit it in something else, and I think it ties it in much nicer now. So I do prefer that. You might want to do that yourself. You might not. It is a pain, but to me, it just made a bit more sense. So that's that tile. I think it's really cool. We've got a lovely big line of sight blocker here. And if we look at some of the buildings which I've got, I'll go into these a bit more detail. The Forgeworld set, you can just put those on there for extra detail, or you can put some buildings on there as well, and then double up and create even more height. So if you've got your Warbringer coming through, you've got some better line of sight options. Anyway, that's that one done. So great tile. And if you've got some Thunderhawks like I have, they look fantastic on there. Great objectives for you to fight over. So it's well worth the investment there, I think. And particularly with Aeronautica Imperialis bringing aeroplanes out now, the two scales are 8mm and they are interchangeable. So that's really cool. Now the next one, I love this tile. It's brilliant. I did a lot of work on it though. This section here, I cut off again, had these all the way around. I cut them off because it wouldn't allow me to build buildings on the top. Which brings me on to a really good point here. Now, if you look at the board as it is, it's quite flat. Other than the airport there we just looked at, there's not a lot of line of sight blocking terrain, and nor are the other two, which I'll show you in a second. So when you start bringing models onto the board, they can pretty see over the entire battlefield, which I get that they're Titans and they're big and they're towering and imposing and all that, but the last thing you want is just an absolute shootout in your games. And I know the Titans can take damage and their shields, and you can vent plasma and regain your shields, I get that, but you still need a bit of tactical play. You still need to be able to move around the board and get cover. So I figured, well, I'll buy these boards because Games Workshop have made this amazing building set, and surely because they've got the same lip, which I can show you here, because they've got the same lip as the buildings from Games Workshop, I'll just be able to build a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 by 3 building and just pop it on, no problem. But it doesn't work. They do not fit on top. Now, so I was just shocked at this. I just thought, what's the point? So now I've got to cannibalize all the Games Workshop stuff to fit within the confines of the Forgeworld Realm Battle tiles, because if not, these will then sit over the board and it will look really weird. It's just the most weirdest thing I've ever seen. So what I've done is I had to trim the tops of these off. I built these buildings here. I haven't finished painting them, but they've got a nice big door which fits really well with the steps, and they fit on there beautifully. And what that does then is that allows us to build a building on the foundation, which would make absolute sense, right? Clearly not. So we've popped that on there, and now we've got a really awesome area for some knights to stalk through if we need to. Or we've created some really great line of sight blocking terrain and you can't see a Warhound Titan behind. Or if we stick a Reaver on, we've now got some cover. So, you know, I think when you buy these boards, you have to be prepared to chop and change a lot of the boards to make it fit the Games Workshop stuff, because surely that was the idea behind it, right? Okay, so that's that. The next one is this longer one. I wanted the buildings to be quite high. And so what I did is I built this building complete out of the Games Workshop stuff, and I stuck it on and it just doesn't fit. It was about 10mm longer than the Forgeworld tile. So what I had to do is for each section, each square section, I had to shave off, because they're angled, aren't they? So I had to shave them in half and then glue them together. But it means then you can't use the buttresses that feed into that V section between the buildings. And so you can't have that. So they've got them on the bottom here, but they haven't got them on the top. And then they don't line up either. So it's just really bizarre. So what I decided is that instead of having massive gaps, I'm just going to make this into a damaged building. And I've got a Warlord Titan, a spare Warlord Titan. I'm going to put the Titan here as it's falling in. Its kind of arms flailing around, and it's kind of brought the floors down with it. So that'll be like a permanent fixture, like it's been there for a long time, and a bit of smoke coming out of it. But I've had to wreck the floors and just tear them up, just to make that a little bit more interesting and create a really cool corridor down here for the knights to stalk through as they go in, because knights get obliterated quite quickly in games of Adeptus Titanicus, as I'm sure you know. So that's a little section here. I was going to build another bit which came on here to give me even more height, so you could hide a Warbringer or a Warlord behind, but the effort you need to go to cut all of these down. In the end, I just gave up. I just couldn't be bothered. Not the attitude, I know, but I just thought it's too much. So I have built a humongous building to go onto this section here. Again, it just doesn't quite fit on the confines of it. It's just really bizarre. Let's make sure it's the right one. Oh no, sorry, this isn't the right one. Sorry, it's for the next one. But I will build a building to go on there because I want complete buildings and I want that line of sight. It'll be very similar to this. I might make it a bit more interesting with I might make these sections go in. Haven't decided yet. But be prepared to chop and change all of the Games Workshop stuff to fit on top. I know there's a lot of bad news, but I do genuinely love these boards. And then, of course, you can jazz up the scenery. If we go back to this tile here with all the Forgeworld stuff, you can put that doesn't fit. You can put the water condensers on there just to make them a little bit more interesting. And I haven't even scratched the surface with the Games Workshop crane and all the generators and all the bits and bobs that I'm painting at the moment. So I'll do a video later on with them as well. But for now, I've just got the boards, the Forgeworld boards, and the Forgeworld accessories. So that's that one. It's really cool. There's loads of room to get your Titans in around in there. It's absolutely fantastic. I love it. You've even got a wrecked Lehman Russ there as well, which is really, really cool. All right, so that's that one. We'll move on to the next one. These are all painted now. This one's really cool. It's got the kind of the warehouses here, and then embedded in them, you've got the kind of silos or parts of generators. Really love that. And then interestingly, you've got these 3 platforms here. Now again, super low, no good for line of sight blocking terrain, but obviously it's meant for you to build some terrain on there. So these ones, I've built lots of options for this. So I built a 2x2 or a 1x2. It's like building Lego all over again, with a door at the front, and that just goes smack bang in the middle. As you can see, the angled sections of that building fit perfectly with the angled sections of these little mini silos. So I did build 3 of those to fit perfectly in there. And that now provides a huge amount of line of sight blocking terrain for the knights and great cover for the Reaver Titan there. So really good stuff. Now, if you want to take that to a different level, what I've done is I've got a load of these warehouses, I guess, the Forgeworld ones, and I cut out with a router or router, depends where you're from, routed out the middle of it, and that makes sure it fits flush over that little docking bay there. Bomb. And that just changes it up. I have done 4 of these, but the other 2 in the other room, but they fit beautifully in there and they fit flush. If I hadn't have drilled that section out, then they would fit crooked and it would look really weird. So I've dremeled them out and they look really cool. I think generally they'll run with these, and then I'll build building tops to go on top of these to make them even higher. And I might even link them and put some pipe work in there, which will make it look really interesting. So the board is very much still work in progress. But what I can do that and then put these little mini condensers on top. That one doesn't work. We'll pull that one off. You know, it's an endless exercise. You can do so much with it. So that looks like that. Really cool. Next, we'll move on to these. Now, all over the board, apart from one tile, there's these little 1x1s, which I don't really know what they are. I kind of imagine them almost like roundabouts or central reservations to kind of divide the traffic throughout the city. And eventually I'll get some small sculptures of, you know, Roman people, women carrying staff and blokes kind of standing and stuff. I look around garden centres all the time or on eBay just to find like little statues that I can put up, put marble on them and make them look really interesting. But for the meantime, what I've done is I've just taken the little toppers for the buildings, built them out of 1x1s and put vents in the tops, and they sit perfectly on there. And I think I've done 15 of these to cover every one on every board, just to create a little bit of height and interest. And if you've got a knight there, they could easily take refuge or get a cover behind, which is quite interesting. Now, the one thing which I didn't realise when I built these little one more ponds, I just popped it on and thought, oh yeah, perfect. There is, and I've cut it off now so you can't see it. There was like a little grill. It was kind of feathered on each side, had a little grill on it. But to get these on, to sit them flush, you have to cut the grill off with a Dremel or a hacksaw or a little hobby saw, whatever you've got. If not, they won't fit on, and they sit really high and they look really weird. So I had to hack every single one off, and there's one either side of there. So I've had to cut them off, and now they will fit perfectly on there, which I think they look really cool. And what I plan to do when I get painting the rest of it, you can get the little bunkers and the little SAM sites or the shield generators. They will fit inside here. And if you've got one with a flat roof like that, they will then fit inside, and they will again create just a little bit more interest for the board, which is really cool. Also, this platform here is really good, but if you're on the same level on another board, a Reaver Titan can see over it. Again, we can use our friend, pop it on there, instant line of sight. Again, if we build some more buildings, we can make multiple levels, make it even higher if you want. So that's really cool. Good board though, really interesting pieces to fight over. Finally, the last piece. Now, this will perfectly demonstrate what I was talking about the building here. So on this end section, it's 2 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's got these little generators on top. It's very cool. Now, I wanted to again increase the height. So I made another building with a flat top, and that fits over the top, which works really well. Now, there is a gap either side, and this is what I talked about earlier about you've got to file the flaps down, no pun intended, you've got to file the flaps down on each side to make sure they sit tighter together. But if you do that, it means that these buttresses will not line up with the buttresses on the Forgeworld molded section. So it's a real pain. So in the end, I just decided that I can handle a 3 or 4 mil gap on either side of the building. And if I'm honest, once it's in place, you don't really see it. And I mentioned earlier about those little grill pieces that I cut out to allow for these. They're on this one here in particular, just there. But I didn't remove these because the buttresses on here, they actually sit on these 4 points. So it worked brilliantly. So we didn't do that in the end. But the gap is quite noticeable. And the buttresses don't align, and it's really, really frustrating. However, it does create a huge line of sight blocking terrain. We can hide a Reaver behind it. You can stop the 2 arm weapons from the Warbringer firing just the big Nemesis cannon on top. So that works really well. And again, we can jazz it up with these vents, the water purifying towers, I think they are. And that does look really cool. Next, we'll move on to this one here. This is a really heavily fortified section. Loads of barrels. It's got a void shield generator out the front. It's got a SAM site and a few crates and loads of barricades. It looks really cool. And I made this to go on top. Now, ideally, I wanted it to go all the way around the edge. I'll move this off. All the way around the edge here, but I couldn't get it to work because of the angles. So in the end, I just made a 3 by 3.5, I guess. Door at the front, up the staircase, and that just sits on there. And again, it provides huge amount of line of sight blocking terrain. You can hide a Reaver behind it very comfortably, and a Nemesis Titan there as well. So really happy with that one. Next, we'll move on to this corner section here. This is the one I was talking about. You can see on the inside loads of hot glue, a huge piece of I think it was 3 mil thick plasticard. And then I made my own top to that. So all I did is I marked it out on a bit of paper. And then I actually have a thing called a K&K Zing. So I drew it in Illustrator. I put it into the K&K Zing program, and it cut it out for me, or it scored it rather. And then I went over the score lines with just a pointy piece of metal, just to reinforce those lines. So I made that one. It worked really, really well. If you haven't got access to a K&K Zing, which I'm sure not many of you have, you can just draw it out on a bit of paper and score it with a sharp knife or or a dart would be ideal because they've got a pointed end. So if you've got a spare dart from a dartboard, you could just score it, or a sharp piece of metal, whatever you've got. I had to cut quite a lot out of this, and I did purposely cut the corner out to show the damage from where the Xiphon has smashed into the side of the building. And I've made it a little bit more interesting by adding these industrial parts to it. And they are recessed back behind the building there. It was a real pain to build, but I think it offers something quite different and quite unique, and it was well worth the effort. Again, we can jazz it up with these, or we could use these silos. Probably doesn't work with the silos, but you could put 2 of these on here. That looks quite cool. Maybe add some of these, you know, just to make the building interesting. Or we can add these spires and towers. That looks weird, but you see where I'm going with it. So very cool. Really love that big piece. And also, if you've got an aircraft or a Thunderhawk, you can easily land it on top of that building because it's quite big. Or when the coronavirus disappears or goes away, we'll hopefully be able to purchase Arvus lighters, which would be really cool. You could do a really cool landing pad on there. And then have like a little command station maybe for important guests or dignitaries coming to this huge building, land in via the Arvus lighter and then access down into the rest of the building. That would be very cool. I'm sure we could work that into a mission at some point as well. And then finally, just pull these off so I don't damage them. There's these ones here, these 2 damaged buildings. Now I've glued the plastic kits directly to the board here. I had to cut out some of the little generators to make way for the buildings to slot down on top of them, but I think it works really well and just shows that the building was there and it's damaged. It was very hard to build a damaged piece of building that would slot on like the rest of them, so I just decided to make it permanently damaged. And then this one here, I'm sure I've done something. Oh yes, so these spire set just fits perfectly in there. Door facing outwards, and then where's the tower? There he is. Just fits brilliantly on there. So if I build the board as I intended, pop that on there. We'll stick that on there. Why not? Stick this one on here. And pop that on there. So, you know, we've got tons of line of sight blocking terrain. I might put that on there. Looks a bit weird, looks a bit small. It'd be really great if they released, if Forgeworld released some smaller kind of municipal vehicles, like a loader or a truck or something. That would really be really cool. I'm sure there's guys out there that have built them, you know, that have got far more skill at scratch building little vehicles than I am. So if there is, that, I'm sure they look great. So now, you know, we've created a huge line of sight blocking terrain for these vehicles, for these Titans rather, to move around in. And I think it works really well. And then when you combine it with the other 4, it looks pretty cool. If we take a look at the colour scheme, which I've gone for the boards, it's very drab, very boring, quite bland. And the reason why I've done that is because generally the Titans or the models have a lot of colour in them. They're quite bright, a lot of hazard stripes. And if I'd painted the buildings in a similar style, then the 2 would just clash. And on camera, it would be really hard to make out the Titan and the very colourful building. So I've purposely gone for a drab colour scheme. It's got the occasional colour here with the yellow and the green and the red in certain circumstances, but they're very, very limited. And all I've done to get the colour into the board is just put the different colours of grey. Now, a lot of you say, well, all your buildings look exactly the same colour. And yeah, you're right. There might be the odd Mechanicum building, which I'll throw in there, which will be quite red. But I've purposely gone for this gradiated grey colour because, as I said, it contrasts really nicely with the Titans. Final thoughts for these boards from Forgeworld. They're a lot of money. There are a few issues with them in terms of warpage and the fact that the 2 kits from Games Workshop and Forgeworld, they don't quite meld together as well as I'd hoped they would have. But I think in general, they are a fantastic addition to your games of Adeptus Titanicus. I know a lot of you are buying and painting your Legios or your Maniples, and perhaps the last thing on your mind is terrain. But the terrain is such an important part of the game. It forces where we move within the battlefield. It dictates our deployment, and it forces us to make decisions during the game about where to move our models. If you've just got a flat open field with one or two buildings in, that is not going to be a fun game. Generally, the side with the most firepower will win. And we see that in 30k, 40k, and Adeptus Titanicus. We all know that terrain is worth investing in. Do you need to invest in £320 worth of Forgeworld tiles? I think if you're producing something like the channel produces, I think it's a really great addition. I don't think it's the be all and end all, but they are a extremely versatile set, and I do think they are worth it. However, there are a lot of people out in the Adeptus Titanicus community that are doing some fantastic jobs with a bit of MDF, and they've built some really fantastic buildings. And my phone is full of these people building these amazing buildings. I'm not very creative when it comes to these kits. I like blocky, straightforward buildings. I'm a bit traditional perhaps, but there are some people that are doing some really great things with pipework and all sorts, and they look really, really cool. So, if you're on Instagram, just put in hashtag Adeptus Titanicus, and it will bring you all of those photos up because they would have been tagged by the original posters. There are, of course, loads of Facebook groups on Facebook for Adeptus Titanicus. Just put in AT and you'll get tons and plenty of inspiration out there. So you just trawl through the photos or even just stick it into Google, which I'm sure you've done. I'll bring up loads of results. So in summary, yes, I do think the boards are worth it, but I think you really need to be invested into the game to justify the cost. And then once you've got the board, there are a few issues which you need to work out. But if you're in this hobby, you're a creative person, you can chop stuff up and make stuff fit, and I'm sure that you'll get some amazing results. All right, that is it. I hope you found this review of the boards interesting to watch. I know there's tons of questions out there about the boards, and I thought I could do my bit by just posting this video. If you've got any specific questions, then please put them in the comments below or email me direct. It's david@the30kchannel.com. And what I might do is I might do a little review once I've finished painting all the Games Workshop terrain and I've painted the final Realm Battle board. And I'll put them all together and I'll do a big showcase, loads of photos. And if you've got any particular questions, I'll save them all up and answer them at the end. However, if you want more of an immediate answer, then the groups on Facebook are the best resource to go to because there's tons of guys on there collecting, building, painting, and they'll probably be able to answer them a bit more immediately than I will. So I hope you found it interesting. If you want to watch games of Adeptus Titanicus on the channel, they are on the website, which is www.the30kchannel.com. We've got guests from the community and Boris and James who do a bit of work for the channel, and they produce games of Adeptus Titanicus. So there is content on there for you to watch. Hopefully you've enjoyed the boards, and I've got some alternative boards on there as well. So if you haven't seen those, please give them a watch. And any games I post on the website, all of the photos are on the Facebook page. So if you don't want to subscribe to the website, that's fine. There are some really great photos of the boards that the channel produces on the Facebook page. So please go there and have a look. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this interesting. I will see you in the next one.